As soon as I opened my eyes, I was in a deserted ancient wilderness. I thought that taking my younger brother through numerous hardships to find my lost family would provide me with peace of mind. However, no one knew that one difficulty was stronger than the other, and bad things came one after another. Fortunately, during the time of travel, I was given a travel benefit. Merit Space Dingdong, warm reminder. As the name suggests, the space for merit is full of surprises. Dingdong, saving a person's life is better than building a level 7 pagoda, one great merit. Space upgrade, send a hospital to be built. Dingdong, kill one mountain bandit, one great merit. Space upgrade, reward a piece of black soil, one sack of corn seeds and one sack of high-yield rice seeds each. Ding-dong ding-dong, let's see how a beautiful and kind-hearted little girl can play with the space of merit and live a life of lying down and winning in an era of constant natural disasters and wars. When did a group of men, women, and children behind me want to hug their thighs? The little girl generously extended her long legs. Not afraid, not afraid. I have thick legs, so I will take you flying the next second. She rose into the air and fell into an embrace. The man's face tasted. You are mine. Keywords of the novel. Group pet little farmer girl. Escape with a space for merit without pop-ups, group pet little farmer girl. Escape with a space for merit complete collection download txt, group pet little farmer girl. Escape with a space for merit latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Crossing, space. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 1 Crossing, Space 1 Warmth. I don't know how many times I looked at the little boy walking beside me with a dirty face and a patched coarse cloth shirt, and had to accept the fact that my soul was wearing it. This is a country facing the west that she knew nothing about. The original owner's hometown suffered from a century-long drought and fled to the village. Unfortunately, the siblings were separated from their families while fleeing. This kind of opening makes medical graduates feel a bit nervous as they are preparing to show off their skills in the medical industry. Her medical skills have no room to show off on this desperate journey of food and drink. Sister, I'm thirsty. 5-year-old brother Wen Wulang looked up at his sister, his face full of caution. Warmth. I'm not quenching my thirst, I'm still hungry. Ding-dong, travel through welfare, give a space for merit. In a blink of an eye, Warmth found himself in a strange space. At the foot is a small circular pool, with a clear and bottomed bottom where a spring continuously pours water out but never overflows. Water. Staring at the spring with a body almost dry and warm, my eyes turned green. The next second, she pounced and buried her whole face in the small pool to drink water. After drinking enough and being full, I sat up warmly and took a long breath comfortably. Warmth regained his senses and found himself still standing in the same place. His younger brother, Wen Wulang, was looking at her with a worried expression on his face. The scene that had appeared before seemed to be her hallucination. She swallowed her saliva, her mouth turned sweet, and she didn't feel thirsty at all. Her previous fatigue was also swept away. It's not an illusion, that space really appeared just now. Warm and excited in my heart. Looking at the little guy with cracked lips, she tried to move her mind, and indeed space appeared again. What a travel benefit. God treats her well. Entering the space again, Warmth noticed a black ground not far from the small pool, which was the same size as the small pool and was also circular. Immediately after, an additional stove with the words, "Outdoor Cafeteria," carved on it appeared out of thin air on the ground. There were several steamers on the stove, still emitting heat. Opening the steamer with Warmth, I was so happy that I almost burst into tears. There are big meat buns, vegetarian buns and mantou in this steamer, and there is also a steamer of eggs, which are steamed with shells. There are many oil paper bags for food in ancient times beside the stove. These oil paper bags vary in size and are complete. Wulang saw that his sister had not moved and his eyes were fixed on him for a while. He felt uneasy and cried, sister, please don't leave me, okay? I can protect you. Please don't leave me anymore. Warmth heard the little guy's words as soon as he left the space, and his eyebrows furrowed unconsciously. Did she ever leave him behind? Warmth frowned slightly, and some images flashed through my mind. Originally, the original owner was raised by her grandfather who worked as a traveling doctor from birth, and rarely returned to the Wen family. The original owner always believed that her parents were biased, so they threw her to the grandfather to take care of, causing her to eat and sleep outdoors since childhood, enduring all the hardships, and harboring a hatred towards her parents and even the Wen family. After my grandfather passed away last year, the original owner was sent back to the Wen family. The reason why the siblings separated from the villagers before was because the original owner was instigated and felt that this younger brother was a burden to the whole family. He wanted to throw him away behind his back and save on exporting food and water. Warm's face turned black. Warmth's face changed, and when Wulang's little heart trembled again. Sister. Warmth and awkwardly pinched his earlobe, then hugged the little one and, using his body's cover, roughly poured a few sips of water into the little one's mouth. Then, he broke half an egg and stuffed it into his mouth, whispering, "Hurry up and eat, don't be seen." The long-lost aroma of egg stunned Wen Wulang, and he instinctively swallowed half of the eggs. After being hungry for so long, Warmth didn't dare to give him too much at once, fearing that his stomach wouldn't be able to handle it, so he gave him a few sips of water. Goro's eyes lit up. This water is so sweet. Eggs also smell so good. Shoo! Warmth signaled him not to speak. The little one nodded vigorously. He knew, that others would come to grab their food and water when they saw it. I assure you that I will never leave you behind in the future. Warmth reassured this child, so that he wouldn't have to worry about being abandoned even in the midst of hunger and thirst. Really? Really? The little one's eyes suddenly turned red. I nodded warmly and solemnly, feeling a slight sourness in my heart. Thank you, sister. The little one shed tears and said, "Sister, I will definitely take good care of you." The Warmth that was still heartbroken a second ago was immediately rendered speechless by the little guy's words. She is not in her 70s or 80s, and she wants him to be filial. She patted his head in frustration and said, "Let's talk about it if we can survive." The little one was just about to nod, and a corner of his eye seemed to catch a glimpse of something. Upon closer inspection, he forcefully grabbed his warm hand and exclaimed, "Sister, dead. Dead. More and more people will die of hunger, thirst, illness, and exhaustion along the way." Warmth did not go to see them, but instead reached out to cover his eyes and said, "Don't look. This child seems to stutter every time he speaks. Is it just a stutter?" "No, there's blood. A lot of blood." Seeing the little guy shaking violently, Warmth couldn't help but lift his eyes and look in the direction he had just seen. At this glance, the warm gaze froze. That person hasn't died yet. She struggled in her eyes, but in the end, she silently led the little one on her way. The doctor's instinct almost stopped her, but fortunately she was rational. Now she is not even sure if her siblings can complete this escape route, and in this situation where there is no cure, she is powerless to save people. Dingdong. Warm reminder. As the name suggests, the space for merit brings surprises to those who excel in it. Warm feet paused. What surprise? Warmth asked the space with his mind. However, the space did not respond to her again. Warmth gritted his teeth and turned his head with the little one. In this barren year, the more things you hold in your hand, the greater the possibility of survival. I hope the space is not drawing big cakes for her. The injured person's face was slightly covered in dust, but it was vaguely visible that he was a 16 or 17-year-old boy. From the contour of his face, it should not be ugly. His abdomen seemed to have been injured by a sharp blade, and blood was still oozing out. I checked his pulse and confirmed that he was still alive. She has no medicine on her body, and she can't even see anything green from here. It's just a luxury to look for herbs. Seeing his lips dry and cracked, Warmth said to the little guy, "Come here." Wulang was very clever. Thinking of the scene when his sister was eating for him, he ran over and used his small body to block other people's sight, allowing Warmth to quietly feed the young man a few sips of water, and then used the remaining water in the water bag to help him clean his abdominal wound. That's all she can do now. Dingdong, saving a person's life is better than building a level 7 pagoda, a great merit. Space upgrade, send a hospital. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Wulang captured. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Wulang captured 2 hospitals. With a warm thought, I couldn't wait to enter the space and take a closer look. As soon as I entered the space, I felt warm and realized that the space had changed again. The area of the previous small pool and outdoor cafeteria had doubled, and there was actually a hospital on the other side of the small pool. Warmth walked into the hospital and quickly took a look, only to find that it was the 3rd-tier hospital she was preparing to work on before her travels, just a scaled-down version. Warmth is too exciting. Goro, you stand here. Warmth left the space, and I didn't want Goro to see my secret. So I asked him to stand with his back to the young man. I quickly disinfected and sutured the wound on his abdomen, tested the skin, and gave him a tetanus shot. After some thought, I added another anti-inflammatory needle. After Warmth put the surgical tools back into the space, he didn't intend to leave for observation and said, "Goro, let's go." As soon as Warmth lifted his foot, his ankle was tightly grasped by a big hand. Warmth startled. Looking down, I noticed that the young man had woken up at some point and was staring at her in confusion. Warm heart next tightening. When did this guy wake up? He didn't see anything, did he? Wulang followed his sister's gaze and exclaimed happily, "Sister, big brother is awake." After Bai Muyang saw clearly who the person in front of him was, he slowly released his grip on the warm ankle. Seeing his gaze gradually shift from confusion to clarity, Warmth confirmed that he had not noticed anything and breathed a sigh of relief. Thinking that the hospital in the space appeared because of him, Warmth reached into his bag and took some food from the outdoor cafeteria in the space. He quickly stuffed it into his clothes and whispered, "I can only help you here. I hope you can live well." After speaking, Warmth pulled Wen Wulang away, intending to avoid the crowd and give the little one something to eat. As Bai Muyang watched the departure of his siblings, the suppressed emotions in his eyes surged. He's not dead. He was unexpectedly reborn. He had seen the little girl who had just saved him in his past life, but at that time he watched her being transferred by several soldiers under the city wall to avoid revealing her identity, and ultimately saved her innocence with death. He touched the warm buns and eggs still in his arms, as well as the water bag that had already dried up and now filled with water, and had plans in mind. Wulang followed his sister and deviated from the crowd. After hesitating for a moment, he boldly wanted to remind his sister that as soon as she opened her mouth, something was stuffed into her. "It's meat buns." Goro's big black and white eyes widened wide. Just now, when my sister was stuffing something into the big brother's arms, he smelled the smell of meat buns. He thought it was because he missed the taste of meat buns too much. So my sister can really turn into a meat bun. Seeing that the little one had no suspicion at all, Warmth swallowed back the excuse that had reached his lips. With food and water, the siblings accelerated their journey. A few days later, the siblings walked to a 3-way intersection and saw the fleeing civilians diverging at this intersection. The two hesitated about which road to take. Warmth seemed to remember something and asked the little one, "Do you remember when my family mentioned which direction they wanted to go?" The original owner had a bad relationship with her family. When discussing matters, she never participated and was not interested in knowing what the family was going to do, which led to her having a dark view of the current situation at home. Wulang turned his head and thought for a moment, Grandpa said he wants to take the villagers to find his aunt. Warmth pondered carefully and said, "If I remember correctly, it seems that Auntie is in the imperial city, right? Their Qingao village is thousands of miles away from the imperial city. The grandfather said that my uncle is doing business in the imperial city. Once we arrive in the imperial city, we can borrow money from my uncle to resettle the villagers. Auntie is the most promising girl in the village, and Grandpa has a good relationship with the villagers. That's why Grandpa decided to take the villagers to find Auntie." Warm lips twitched. "Is Mr. Wen reliable or not? There are 300 to 400 people in Qingao village, not 3 or 4 people. Even if everyone can walk smoothly to the imperial city and even if the uncle has money in his hands, can the old man guarantee that the uncle is willing to lend money to help the villagers? If my uncle doesn't want to help, wouldn't the old man have to take the whole village back? No matter what Mr. Wen plans, Warmth thinks it's better to find someone first." Warmth asked several refugees in a row, but they were not sure which road was the right way to the imperial city, as none of them had traveled far. Warmth was about to ask someone again when he heard Goro's screams of surprise. "Looking back, I found that the little guy was caught by 2 big men and struggling desperately. Hurry up." One of the people saw Warmth and noticed them. They picked up Goro with their accomplice and ran away. "Sister, help me, they want to eat me." Wulang was dizzy from being jolted, but he still caught sight of his sister chasing after him, and suddenly became less afraid. "Stop them. Villagers, please help me stop them. My younger brother. That's my younger brother." Warmth chased and begged for help from the people walking ahead. But everyone looked indifferent, not only did they not help to stop others, but some even started thinking when they heard Goro's cries for help. Seeing the warmth in the eyes of these refugees, my heart felt a chill. She only read about the matter of changing children to eat from books, and never expected that one day she would personally experience such a terrible thing. The first 2 big men had not eaten or drunk for several days, and then carried the child Wulang, gradually becoming unable to run. Perhaps due to being full, or perhaps because of being in a hurry, the warmth that had always fallen behind in running in his past life caught up with the 2 at an incredible speed, picking up the bundle in his hand and beating them wildly. Of course, the 2 big men couldn't be afraid of her being a little girl. After being hit a few times, they became angry and embarrassed, saying, "I'm just thinking that one is not enough to fill my teeth. Since I brought it to you myself, I'll do it for you." The 2 big men exchanged glances, threw the little guy in their hands onto the road, and decided to first deal with the sharp little girl in front of them. The bundle in Warmth's hand was waving wildly, without any organization, and the 2 big men couldn't get close to her for a moment. But soon, the warm calf was suddenly kicked hard by one of them, causing her to almost fall to the ground. "Sister." Having just regained consciousness from his dizziness, Goro saw his sister being choked by one of them. Without hesitation, he picked up a stone the size of a bowl and rushed over, throwing it fiercely at the person. Due to the relationship between height and strength, Goro only hit the big man's back in one go, and did not cause too much damage to him. Instead, he angered the other person. The big man turned around in anger and picked up Goro's collar, wanting to throw him out. If this is really thrown out, it would be a serious injury if not killed. Seeing this warm scene, my heart shrank fiercely. Suddenly, something came to my mind and my mind moved. I took out an anesthesia gun from the hospital and shot it at the man. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Sisters can transform into delicious food. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Sisters can transform into delicious food. 3. Because the dose of the numb-drunk gun was high enough, the man collapsed instantly. Warmth stood up and startled. Fu Ding grabbed Wulang's clothes and didn't let him fall to the ground. He touched his small face, then his arms and legs, and nervously asked, "Where did he get hurt?" "Sister." Wulang, who narrowly escaped death, shook his body and hugged Warmth, ignoring the pain on his body. "All right, it's okay, it's okay. Warmth let out a soft breath and patted the little one to soothe him. Third, get up quickly. The other big man over there saw his accomplice fall to the ground and thought he was trying to force himself to take action. He wanted something ready to eat, so he stepped forward and kicked him. Don't pretend to be dead, otherwise everyone will go hungry if they run away. Wulang's body trembled even more when he heard the voice of the big man. He looked over at the person on the ground through his sister's arm and saw that they were motionless. He asked in horror, "Sister, is that person dead?" "It's okay, he just fainted." Warmth knows that the big man will not wake up for a while. She solved one and was not afraid of the remaining one. Dead. The big man over there suddenly exclaimed in surprise after sniffing his accomplice's breath. Warmth suddenly looked up and saw a puddle of blood flowing from the back of the head of the man who had been shot with an anesthetic gun, and he was also stunned. It turned out that when this big man fell, the back of his head happened to hit the stone that Wulang had just hit. The warm brain exploded with a loud bang. Dead. Wulang's crying also stopped for a moment, and then he cried even harder. "Sister. We killed someone." Warmth and palpitations. Is this considered manslaughter? Dingdong, kill one mountain bandit, one great merit. Space upgrade, reward a piece of black soil, 1 sack of corn seeds and 1 sack of high-yield rice seeds each. Are these two big men mountain bandits? Warm and bewildered, she lifted her eyes and turned around to vomit in the next second. Originally, another bandit was actually gnawing on the meat of the deceased bandit. On the road, several fleeing civilians saw this and approached to get a share of the soup, but were brutally driven away by the mountain bandits who had eaten blood all over their mouths. Wearing this barren year, it's really unbearable without some endurance. Sister. Wulang was about to take a look when his eyes were covered by warmth. Don't look. Warmth suppressed the tumbling in his stomach, blocking the little one's sight with his body in half, pushing him away from this terrifying place. Let's go quickly. This will warm me up and I no longer have time to dwell on my own negligence in killing someone. The refugees were already starving, and under the stimulation of these two bandits, they didn't know what they would do. They couldn't linger any longer. Warmth guessed it right. Not long after their siblings left, several fleeing men who were driven away by the bandits together killed the bandits. The big guy shared the flesh of the two bandits together. Wen's siblings were trembling and didn't feel tired. The two of them walked faster and faster, walking several miles in one breath. It wasn't until Wen noticed that Wulang's condition was not right that he quickly stopped and carried him on his back. Warmth took the little one away from the official road of the refugees and found an inconspicuous place to sit down and rest. She is now surrounded by every tree and grass, afraid that her siblings will become targets of those refugees again. Sister. We killed someone. As soon as he sat down, Wulang cried again with warmth in his arms. Big brother, can you stop talking? I'm also very uneasy. Warmth feels like my heart is still trembling. Although it is unavoidable, the act of involuntary homicide, as a person with a modern soul, may not be acceptable for a while. After some psychological construction, she forced herself to calm down and gently stroke the little guy's head, sending him a message. Wulang, that person just now was a mountain bandit. We are doing harm for the people. Besides, it's me who killed him, not you. This child is so young, we cannot let him leave a psychological shadow. Upon hearing this, Wulang immediately lifted his tears and said, Is that person a mountain bandit? Yes. Warmth forced himself to squeeze out a smile that could be considered brilliant. If that bandit didn't die, maybe more children and innocent civilians would be killed by them. Do you think he should die? The little one thought about almost being eaten by those two mountain bandits just now, and couldn't help but shiver. With a stiff face, he said, Damn it. The little one thought for a moment and then asked, Sister, did you just say that we are doing harm to the people? My second brother has been to the county town and when he returned, He told him a chivalrous story he heard from a storyteller in the county town. This child has had a great hero dream since childhood. Yes. The little one's eyes were bright as he said, "Have we eliminated harm for the people?" Warmth didn't understand why the child suddenly became excited, but still nodded wooden. "Do I count as a young hero?" Warmth. Little hero. The adults who do harm to the people are called great heroes. Aren't I just a child or a little hero? Yes, you're a little hero. Okay, she's the only one who needs psychological counseling. No matter how early Wulang matured, he was just a child. Such cruel and terrifying things were quickly replaced by his dreams in his place. But for Warmth, today is an unforgettable nightmare. She looked up at the refugees walking numbly on the distant path, genuinely feeling that their siblings couldn't walk any further, otherwise today's situation would definitely happen again. In the eyes of outsiders, both of their siblings are just children, and a vulnerable group like them can easily become targets for others. Wulang, sister, brought a lot of food and water. Let's find a place to hide and wait for Grandpa and Mom to settle down before picking us up. Do you think it's okay? Warmth asked the little guy in a deliberative tone. The little one looked confused and said, "How long will we have to wait?" "I don't know how long to wait." Warmth didn't deceive the child and analyzed the actual situation before him. "We don't know martial arts, and there's no one around to protect us. It's very dangerous to walk to the imperial city like this." She found that the food in the outdoor cafeteria in the space would automatically replenish after she took it away, which was inexhaustible, so she didn't have to worry about food and drink at all. Wulang also had lingering fears about what had just happened, but he also had his worries. What if Grandpa and his team can't find us? He really misses Grandpa and Grandma, his parents and brother, as well as uncles, aunts, and cousins. If our family really can't find us, when there are no more refugees on the way, let's go back to the village and wait for them. Now all the worries in Wulang's heart were dispelled. Okay, let's go back to the village and write to Grandpa again. Sister knows magic and can create food and drink, so he doesn't worry about going hungry at all. Warmth pointed to the small hill not far away and said, "Let's settle down on that mountain. The view from the mountain is good, and it is far from the main road, allowing for a panoramic view of the surrounding area without being easily noticed." Xia Shanbao seemed to be very close to them, but unexpectedly, he walked for almost half an hour. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Refugees touching the mountain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Refugees touching the mountain. For Warmth didn't dare to be careless, and only spoke up at the foot of the mountain to let Goro rest. After confirming that there were no other refugees following behind, Warmth took out 2 large meat buns from the space and handed them to Goro. "Sister, just one is enough for me, you can eat it too." Wulang held the meat bun in one hand and nibbled on it, while the other hand handed the other meat bun to his warm mouth. They don't know how long they will stay here, they have to save food. Warmth in her heart, but now she really can't hear the word meat, let alone smell the smell of meat. Her stomach churned and she quickly turned her gaze away, saying, "I'm not hungry, you can eat. If it's not enough, there's more." Wulang saw that his sister really didn't want to eat, so he didn't compromise anymore and started eating meat buns in large bites. Warmth took out a water bag from his bundle and rinsed it several times before barely suppressing the surging nausea. Wulang finished 2 big meat buns and took a few sips of water, then hiccuped and warmed before pulling him up the mountain. This mountain is not high, and the grass on it has dried completely, leaving only some thicker tree trunks. This is stronger than the dry mountain tops they passed through before, which means they are getting further and further away from the drought-stricken area. Warmth found some thick dry branches and hay, and built a simple triangular house with the support of the thick trunk. The roof was covered with some hay as a temporary residence, which can provide shade during the day and rest at night. After dinner, Warmth punctured the blisters on the soles of the siblings' feet and disinfected them with medicine. Then, he took a quilt from the disinfection room in the space and spread it out. The siblings slept like this. Warmth has never had a good rest since crossing over, which can be physical and mental exhaustion, but what happens during the day occasionally flashes in front of her, and her tense nerves cannot relax. She tried it before, but when she picked up the item, her mind only entered the space, and people couldn't enter at all. Otherwise, she could take Goro into the space and hide for a while. When the year was better, she could come out and suffer less. Without good physical strength, when faced with danger, one can only surrender. As dawn approaches, I force myself to close my eyes with warmth. Amidst the confusion, warmth seemed to hear subtle movements coming from not far away. Her first reaction was to wake up Goro, put his cotton jacket into the space, and walked out of the makeshift cottage. At this moment, the sky was already dawn, and Warmth saw a tall figure approaching them from the hillside below, with a clear target. Warm, feel out the anesthesia gun from the space. At this point, the figure was only a dozen meters away from them. Stop! Warm shouted from a high place to the person, don't come over. The figure stopped and said, it's me. I don't know you. Stay away from us. Warmth was certain that he didn't recognize the other person and didn't dare to relax as he stared at him. Wulang didn't recognize the other person either. He tightly held a sharpened wooden stick in both hands and stared at the figure with a tight face. If the other party dares to step forward, he will fiercely stab them. I am the person you saved a few days ago, by Muyang. The person pointed to the foot of the mountain and said, when I came over just now, I saw 3 refugees wanting to touch the mountain. Warmth looked in the direction he pointed and saw that there were indeed 3 people lying there, which made his heart tighten. Did some refugees touch the mountain? Did she keep being careful, or was she being targeted? Upon Bai Muyang's reminder, Wulang recognized the person and said, Sister, it's Big Brother. Bai Muyang took a few steps forward again. Although Warmth recognized him, he dared not completely relax, and no one could guarantee whether this person had been staring at the food on her. Are you okay with your injury? Warmth asked. Thanks to your help, the wound has started to scab. I don't know what method this girl used to treat him, but the originally wide wound on her 2 fingers healed in an instant. It was inconvenient to talk from a long distance like this. Bai Muyang saw them recognize him and was about to approach his siblings. The 2 of them were once again stopped by Warmth and said, don't move. Bai Muyang stopped his steps and said, Miss, I have no ill intentions. Big Brother, Sister has set a trap, I'm afraid you'll get hurt. Wulang saw that Bai Muyang misunderstood his sister's meaning, and smiled as he approached and took away the dry branches and hay in front of Bai Muyang, revealing a small ditch with sharpened branches inserted into it. The soil on this mountain is too hard, even if it is warm and tools can be taken out from the logistics department of the space hospital, it cannot dig the ditch deep. Such a small trap cannot harm people, but it can provide a wake-up call for those who are asleep and give them time to react. Goro warmly greeted Bai Muyang into the cabin to rest, but it was too late for Warmth to stop him. Looking at the little guy who has no sense of defense, it feels warm and headache-inducing. Warmth didn't think Bai Muyang would come to this mountain so coincidentally. Standing outside the cottage, he looked at the young man who could fill her makeshift cottage with just one person and asked directly, how did you know we were here? I heard you were in trouble and rushed over, Bai Muyang said. I know some martial arts. Where are you going? I'll escort you there. In his past life, he refused to save her, but in this life, she saved his life. Without her treatment, food, and water, he was likely to die again after being injured and losing too much blood. The only thing he can do now is to take care of his siblings. He started his journey after resting in place for a day due to excessive blood loss. He had already chased a few miles away when he accidentally heard a woman with a child scare him to behave better, otherwise he would almost be snatched away and eaten like the little boy before. He asked carefully before knowing what their siblings had gone through, and then went back to find someone. Warmth stared at his thin physique for a while, then hesitated and said, "Do you know martial arts?" "Yes. It would be great if someone were to escort you." Warmth, who had already reached the limit of his mental endurance, almost agreed. However, thinking of his injury, Warmth refused and said, "Thank you for your kindness, but I still won't bother you." If his enemy were to be found, their siblings wouldn't know martial arts, wouldn't they become targets of others? This period of time has been trembling, even though there are still people who touch it in the middle of the night hiding on this mountain. It seems that only by returning to the side of the Wen family can one truly feel at ease. Warmth decided to continue on the journey and reunite with the Wen family. Bai Muyang saw that the little girl was on guard against him and did not force him. However, he did not leave due to warm rejection. He followed from a distance to ensure the safety of the siblings. There were refugees on the road, followed by Bai Muyang. Warmth had to be careful repeatedly, and every time I replenished my water and food, I deliberately took Wulang towards the distance. At noon that day, the Warmth that had already moved away from the crowd had just taken out the meat buns from the space when suddenly more than a dozen refugees rushed over and surrounded the siblings. Warmth quickly put the meat bun back into space and pulled Goro behind him. "What do you want to do?" Warmly and without leaving a trace, he took out the anesthesia gun from the space and covered it with wide cuffs. She only has 2 hands, facing more than a dozen refugees. Even if she had an anesthetic gun, she couldn't guarantee Goro's safety. More than a dozen refugees, male and female, all stared fixedly at the siblings. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Does she look like a bodhisattva? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Does she look like a bodhisattva? 5. I can smell the fragrance of the meat bun, it's inside her bag. So every time they avoid us, they're just eating meat buns. Look, they still have water. A woman pointed to the water bag tightly held in Goro's arms and shouted loudly. I've been saying that I've seen them drinking water and eating these past few days, and you guys even said I'm so hungry and talking nonsense. Give us the meat buns and water quickly. After confirming that the siblings had food and drink on their bodies, more than a dozen refugees rushed forward like crazy and started grabbing. Warmth was afraid that Goro might be hurt, so he wanted to throw the water bag in Goro's arms to distract these people. However, before she could move, she saw a flash of Bai Muyang's figure, wielding a knife and directly using it to knock these refugees unconscious one by one. Warmth. Do you know a little bit of martial arts? It's 1,000,000,000 points, right? In fact, Bai Muyang was prepared to come over after realizing the intentions of these people, but he didn't expect so many people to target these siblings. Warmth also saw several refugees lying on the ground in the distance, feeling a wave of fear in his heart. She picked up the bundle left by the refugees and sincerely thanked Bai Muyang. "Thank you. If it weren't for him today, both of their siblings would have been injured." Many people have mixed eyes. No matter how careful you are, there may be times of negligence, Bai Muyang reminded. Especially when they are eating meat buns, the fragrance wafts far away. Gulu gulu. Suddenly, a cry came from his stomach, and Bai Muyang's face stiffened. Warmth hesitated for a moment, then took out an oiled paper bag containing buns and eggs from his bundle and handed it to him. Bai Muyang awkwardly took a few steps back and said, "No need, I'm not here to eat." She had given him so much food before, so there might not be much food left for the siblings. "I know you're not here to eat." Warmth had completely let go of his guard and stepped forward to put the oiled paper bag in his hand. "I still have it in my bag, I can't go hungry." "Big brother, you can eat it. My sister has plenty of food in her bag." Wulang also helped out. Sister can constantly transform food and water from her burden. Warm touch on the forehead. "I almost got robbed just now. Why doesn't this child have a long memory and say everything outside?" But on second thought, when Wulang said this, did the food in her burden also count as passing through the Ming Road with Bai Muyang? Seeing Bai Muyang motionless, Warmth deliberately raised his small face and said, "If you're not full, where's the strength to escort us?" In the blink of an eye, he knocked down more than 10 refugees. If he really wanted to focus on their food, he could just grab it. The only question now is whether he has any enemies. However, he has saved their siblings twice, and even if there is really an enemy, she still recognizes them. Do what you said before, still count. Warmth looked at him and asked seriously. Bai Muyang paused and said, "What do you mean?" "I know you've been following and protecting us these past 2 days, he said with a warm smile. She was not foolish. As soon as he rescued them from the refugees, she had already confirmed that he genuinely wanted to escort them. Count. Bai Muyang also replied seriously. Then hurry up and eat. We really don't lack food and drink, Wen said in a slightly lower voice. That night, Warmth slept for the first time after crossing the river. The next day, I woke up fresh and refreshed, and took out cooked eggs and mantou from the bundle for breakfast. Because I passed through Minglu from Wulang's mouth, Warmth was not worried that Bai Muyang would become suspicious. What Warmth didn't know was that Bai Muyang had long felt strange because there was no water source nearby. However, when Warmth borrowed a urination, he filled their water bags with water. Another thing is that every time she takes out food from her bag, it's hot, just like what she just took out of a pot. Of course, compared to the incredible thing of his rebirth, these are not things anymore, so he didn't want to delve deeper. In addition to Bai Muyang's warning, the meat buns are very fragrant. Several people eat and drink water to avoid the refugees. They also eat eggs and mantou that are not very tasty. When they are warm, they dare not take out the food buns. After walking for 2 more days, I could gradually see something green on the road. The refugees seemed to see hope and quickened their pace with excitement, hoping to find the water source as soon as possible. Warmth followed Bai Muyang's advice and didn't dare to act too special. He suppressed the pain in his feet and quickened his pace. And Wulang walked a section with Bai Muyang on his back and a section on his own. On that day, a woman suddenly knelt down to them holding a motionless child who was about 2 years old. "Miss, my son is starving to death soon. Could you please give him some food to eat? Please." The woman was holding the child and wanted to rush forward, but was stopped by Bai Muyang. She could only kowtow to Warmth from a distance, clearly knowing that there was food in her bag. Bai Muyang was afraid of Warmth and softened his heart, so he said in a deep voice, "I can't give it." With a warm and expressionless expression, he glanced at the child in the woman's arms, then at the refugees who were staring at her not far away and said, "I know." Upon hearing her decisive answer, Bai Muyang couldn't help but look up at her. "Miss, please be kind and give me something to eat. My son hasn't eaten anything for several days. Just 1 bite, please." The woman continued to cry and plead. Warmth turned a blind eye to the woman and continued to move forward. Wulang looked at the child in the woman's arms and couldn't help but say, "Sister. Let's go." Warmth held Goro's hand tightly, gesturing for him not to speak. The other refugees who were closely watching the Warmth also looked disappointed. If this girl had a soft heart and offered food to that woman, they could also come forward and beg, perhaps they could also beg for some food, otherwise, they could also snatch the food they begged for from the woman. After a distance from the woman, Wulang asked in a muffled tone, "Sister, will that little brother die?" Warmth lowered his head to look at the little guy and told him a fact cruelly. "That child has already died a long time ago." Seeing Goro's shocked expression, Warmth told him something even more cruel. "That woman was one of the refugees who wanted to grab our food before, and that child is not hers either. The child's clothes were covered in mud all over his body, and there were also mud lumps in his hair. If she guessed correctly, the child should have been buried by family members just after starving or dying of illness, and then pulled out of the grave by the woman. The woman couldn't snatch their food, so she wanted to sell tragedy to gain her sympathy. Does she look like a bodhisattva?" Bai Muyang didn't expect that this girl could see everything. He looked up at her with some surprise, but after all, there are differences between men and women. He quickly turned his gaze away. After hearing these words, Wulang widened his eyes and looked at his sister with some confusion. How could there be such bad people in this world who steal their food and even deceive them? Is there that little brother who starved to death? Warmth took the opportunity to educate him. Goro, there is nothing wrong with having a kind heart, but we cannot have a bad heart. With so many refugees, we cannot save them even if we want to, let alone those who still want to harm us. She is not so magnanimous, she cannot do things that reward good for evil. Warmth also knows that she shouldn't erase the kindness of her children, but on this journey of escape, there are crises everywhere. One mistake can take their lives, and she can only push the seedlings to grow. Warmth wanted to continue teaching Goro, but found that the refugees in front suddenly went crazy and ran forward. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Green Mountains. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Green Mountains 6 The warm expression slightly changed and said, "What happened earlier?" Bai Muyang, who was walking behind the siblings, looked up and said, "They are all heading towards the mountain ahead." As Bai Muyang finished speaking, the refugees behind him rushed forward and shouted loudly, "The mountains ahead are green. They are green. Green mountains. It's green mountains." Someone cried. "There must be water and food on top." Warmth looked up and saw a lush mountain top. The refugees don't know how long they haven't seen the entire green scenery. There must be a water source on this mountain, and if you're lucky, you might even be able to catch some wild animals. Watching the refugees rushing up the mountain like crazy, I looked warmly at Bai Muyang. "It's cool on the mountain, let's go rest too," Bai Muyang said. Warmth also has this meaning. Wulang had short legs and was forced to climb the mountain, so Bai Muyang decided to carry him up. After walking for so long, the soles of Warmth and Goro's shoes were worn through. Although she quietly disinfected and drugged them every night, her old wounds happened to add new blisters, and Warmth didn't want to move until she reached the mountaintop. Bai Muyang saw the refugees scattered around in search of water sources or food, so he pointed to the dense grass next to him and said, "You stay in the grass and I'll go find food. You're not allowed to come out until I come back." Previously, there was no other choice but to eat and drink from the little girl. Today, when he arrived in the mountains, he had to find something to eat. The siblings nodded obediently, and as soon as he left, Warmth moved into the space. She doesn't know how to farm. A few days ago, she tried to scatter a handful of corn seeds and rice seeds from the space reward onto the black soil, but the next day it turned into a cornfield and a rice field. Yesterday, both corn and rice were ripe, and the space was automatically collected. They were piled up next to the cafeteria like two small mountains. These days, every meal is either eggs or buns, it's time for a change of flavor. On this mountain, she happened to have an excuse to take out a few corn sticks to satisfy her craving. After the space upgrade, the canteen has also been upgraded, with many varieties. In addition to noodles, rice, congee, pancakes and various cakes, there are many chickens, ducks, fish, pork, and many aquatic products. However, whether it is meat or seafood, they are not live. Some have been cooked, some have been killed, and they are sorted and placed in baskets in outdoor canteens without being damaged. Worried about stimulating the refugees, Warmth now even dares not take out meat buns, not to mention those dishes that have been cooked and taste great. When Bai Muyang left, there were no refugees around. He took out 2 bowls of rice from the space, covered with a thick layer of braised pork belly. "Eat quickly. Sister knows magic and can make delicious food anytime and anywhere." Wulang has become accustomed to it. As soon as sister speaks, he takes the chopsticks and eats them happily. After finishing the meal, warm up and put the dishes into the space, then rinse the little one's mouth with water to prevent Bai Muyang from smelling the aroma of meat when he comes back. "Sister, rice is really delicious, and braised pork belly is also delicious. Wulang said as he aftertasted. This is the best braised pork belly he has ever tasted. With a warm smile, he said, when I find Grandpa and his companions, I will make them delicious for you every day. Before Bai Muyang could return, Warmth examined the wound on the soles of Wulang's feet and wrapped him with gauze after taking the medicine. Both siblings have holes in the soles of their shoes, so this gauze barely serves as the sole. In fact, there are also soft rubber-soled nurse shoes in the hospital, but there is no one as small as Goro who can wear them. Moreover, the material and workmanship of nurse shoes are impossible to appear in this dynasty, and she cannot easily take them out. Warmth had just helped Goro put on his shoes when he heard someone coming towards the grass. Let go of me. Help. The next second, the grass was cleared away. A middle-aged man was dragging a young woman in his 20s as he was about to burrow in when he saw the siblings in the grass and was startled. Warmth immediately pulled Goro behind him, holding an anesthetic gun in his right hand under his sleeve. The little woman took advantage of the middle-aged man's confusion and forcefully broke free from his grip, then turned around and ran. The middle-aged man reacted and turned to chase after her. After a few steps, he grabbed her and slapped her in the face with his hand, saying, "Bitch, let you run. Help." The little woman noticed several refugees coming from the foot of the mountain and quickly called for help. However, those refugees only searched around for food without even looking at her, afraid that they would slow down and the food on the mountain would be found by others. The young woman's heart has cooled. The middle-aged man saw that she had been honest and began to tear at her clothes, saying, "It's shameless to give face, then serve me here." At this moment, an 8 or 9-year-old boy angrily rushed out from behind a big tree not far away, holding a stick in his hand and sweeping towards the big man without saying a word. Seeing the little boy, the little woman, who had already given up resistance, had a wave in her eyes and struggled. "Cheer, don't come over, go." The middle-aged man grabbed the stick waved by the little boy and pushed it casually. The little boy, who had long been so hungry that his hands and feet were weak, was pushed and rolled down the slope. The little woman lost her voice and shouted, "Cheer." Warmth also tightened my heart, and I suddenly stood up from the grass. Fortunately, the little boy was clever and panicked, grabbing a handful of weeds to stabilize his body. Warm breathed a sigh of relief. However, Goro did not see this thrilling scene because his body was blocked by the grass. Hiss. Warmth followed the sound and saw that the little woman's coat had been torn open by the big man, revealing her pink belly pocket. The little boy was desperately pulling on the weeds, looking up with a strong anger and resentment in his eyes. "Close your eyes, don't look," the little woman pleaded to the child from a distance. Tears of despair slipped from the corner of her eyes, and she, unable to resist, could only let the middle-aged man do whatever he wanted with her. What a heartwarming thought. Just as I had a thread of vitality, it gave birth to evil thoughts, damn it. The fire in Wen's heart rubbed upwards, and his fist became hard. Seeing that there were no other refugees around, he pushed Wulang back into the grass and walked out with an anesthetic gun in hand. Just as the middle-aged man was about to pull off the little woman's underwear, a shot was shot at his waist. Perhaps due to insufficient anesthesia, the middle-aged man turned around and glared at Warmth with a fierce expression after being shot. At the same time, Bai Muyang came down from the mountaintop and saw this scene from afar. His eyes darkened, and he picked up a leaf and threw it at the middle-aged man, hitting him in the back of the neck. As the middle-aged man fell, Bai Muyang had already flown up to several people. Warm and shocked, he glanced at Bai Muyang, worried that he would find the anesthesia needle on the middle-aged man's body. He took a few steps forward and used the action of supporting the little woman to remove the anesthesia needle from the middle-aged man's waist. Dingdong, seeing injustice on the road, drawing a gun to help, 1 merit. Reward a sack of extra potatoes. Are there rewards again? And it's also something out of the box. Isn't she going to post it? Hearing the crying of the little woman, warmth restrained her spirit. Watching the little woman holding the little boy rescued by Muyang burst into tears, my heart felt warm and sorrowful. In the face of disasters, both good and evil in human nature are more easily revealed. As a person from another world, besides protecting herself, she also needs to work hard to adapt. Suddenly, Warmth sensed the gaze of Bai Muyang falling on him. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Can meat sell me a little? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Can meat sell me a little? 7. Thinking of his warning before leaving, he pinched his earlobe with a warm and guilty heart and said, I came out only to ensure my own safety. Brother Bai, did you catch the wild rabbit and the mountain chicken? Wulang had already crawled out of the grass and saw the wild rabbit and the mountain chicken tied with grass vines hanging around Bai Muyang's waist. He happily ran towards him. Brother Bai, you're amazing. Wulang looked up at Bai Muyang with a look of admiration. Your sister, I'm not strong anymore, he said, giving the little guy a warm and sour glare. The little white-eyed wolf, who gives him food and drink every day, doesn't necessarily look at himself with such eyes. Wulang was no longer afraid of his sister. After hearing these words, he smiled and said, Sister is also very powerful. Sister knows magic, even more powerful than Brother Bai. However, my sister said that she cannot tell anyone about her ability to spell. Bai Muyang smiled and handed the wild rabbit and pheasant tied with grass vines to Wulang. He then turned around and picked up the unconscious middle-aged man, walking towards the other side of the forest before returning for a moment. Warmth secretly glanced at him. Bai Muyang saw something in her eyes and said, I didn't kill him. A warm "oh" sound. Bai Muyang didn't know if she believed it or not, but instead said, while they were still looking for food, let's hurry up and get on our way. Those refugees will probably be reluctant to leave this mountain for a while. They will save a lot of trouble on their way at this time. Warmth is in favor. So, these rabbits and pheasants. Both the wild rabbit and the pheasant are still alive, and we will treat them when there is a water source. The trees on this mountain are growing normally, and there are also wild animals appearing. There should be a water source nearby. The three of them continued their journey down the mountain and encountered some refugees who had not yet climbed the mountain. The number of people was not large, and they all had surplus food on hand. The next evening, a small river did indeed appear not far away, but the depth only reached the ankle and the water did not flow. Nevertheless, the refugees who fled from the famine were still very excited and ran towards the small river. Many people jumped into the river and even lay down completely. Wulang was also extremely happy and ran over, holding water and splashing it on his face. Warmth also followed quickly. Although there is water in the space, she dare not wash her face clean before traveling with Bai Muyang, because she knows that the original owner's appearance is too attractive and does not want to cause unnecessary trouble. After traveling with Bai Muyang, she had no excuse to fetch water to wash her face. Nowadays, with Bai Muyang present and fewer refugees on the road, she no longer has any concerns about this. Warm washed his face, then pulled Goro over to help him clean his body and put on clean clothes. And she herself plans to wait until evening to find a deserted place to take a shower. Warmth had just washed the clothes that Goro had changed into and spread them out on the nearby grass when he saw Bai Muyang walking from the upper reaches of the river. As he approached, Warmth froze for a moment. Originally, Bai Muyang had also undergone some cleaning, revealing a handsome appearance. You look pretty good. A good appearance is pleasing to the eye, and a warm heartfelt compliment was given. Then, waiting for Bai Muyang's reciprocity, he only coughed lightly and said, the hare and pheasant have been treated. Do you want grilled food or soup? Goro. Roasted. Warmth. I want to drink chicken soup. Okay. Bai Muyang smiled and arranged, make soup with mountain chicken and roast wild rabbits. To cook soup, one must have a pot. Bai Muyang left for a while and somehow got 3 bamboo tubes from somewhere. He then took out a dagger and chopped the pheasant into pieces, putting them into the bamboo tube. The water in the river is barely enough for bathing, but if you want to drink it, the warmth is still a bit unsettling. She took Bai Muyang's envoy to collect firewood, then avoided other refugees by the river and filled the bamboo tube with spring water. She also took out ginger powder and salt from the outdoor cafeteria in the space and put them in. In addition, she wrapped some cumin powder and salt in oil paper to prepare for roasting rabbits. Bai Muyang made 2 temporary small stoves, one for boiling soup and the other for grilling wild rabbits. The chicken soup over there is not ready yet, and the aroma of the grilled meat wafts out first. The refugees who were drinking or resting by the river looked towards them one after another. On the escape route, everyone only eats a meal in the morning to save food, and doesn't eat anything at noon or evening. This will smell the aroma of the meat, and the refugees by the river are constantly swallowing saliva. They only ate dry food all the way, and they almost forgot what meat tastes like. In fact, most of the refugees who can walk here are well prepared with food and water, and some of them come from affluent families. The chicken soup was cooked, and the rabbit meat was also grilled. The 3 of them were about to start eating when they saw a fat man in his 30s with a big head and ears walking over. "Where are we eating?" The chubby man stared at the grilled meat in Goro's hand and said happily, "My surname is Ma, and I escaped from the wilderness in Zhongzhou." "Are you both?" Looking at him warmly, he said, "What's up?" The chubby man rubbed his hands and said, "My mother and a few children smell the meat from your side and are a bit greedy. If you have more, can you sell some to us? I'll give you silver." Warmth thought of being penniless and wasting endless food in the space, and my mind turned. "Not for sale." Bai Muyang refused. Warmth knew that making money was not a good time at the moment, so he didn't speak up. The chubby man left with a disappointed expression, and Bai Muyang explained to Warmth, "They have food and won't starve to death." Warmth nodded and said, "You can tell. If this scenery can still grow like this, there must be plenty to eat." In no time, Warmth heard the chubby man surnamed Ma's screams and curses, but it wasn't about cursing the child, it was about cursing his wife. Other people's family matters, Warmth is not taken to heart. The 3 of them had enough to eat and drink, and it was getting dark. They found a big stone not far from the river and leaned against it to sleep. Midnight, Warmth quietly rises up. As soon as she made a move, Bai Muyang spoke out, "Where are you going?" "I'll go wash up and come back later." Bai Muyang paused slightly and cautioned anxiously, "Pay attention to safety, don't go for too long." In this wilderness and at night, Bai Muyang was not at ease with her. However, she was going to take a shower, and as a big man, he couldn't follow. He could only stand up and observe whether the refugees around him were watching her, and then secretly followed her. Fortunately, after just over a quarter of an hour of warmth, Bai Muyang returned to sleep. The next morning, Warmth took out a few corn sticks from his bag and let Bai Muyang bake them. In addition, he took out 3 cooked eggs, one for each person. "This corn was found on the previous hill, I forgot to tell you." Warmth was afraid of Bai Muyang's suspicion and explained to him the origin of the corn. Bai Muyang has no other thoughts. He just thinks that this girl's burden is a treasure that can always surprise you from time to time. 2 days later, a few people arrived outside a city called Miancheng. To the surprise of several people, many refugees gathered outside Miancheng. Judging from their accent, these refugees probably didn't come from Zhongzhou. "Are you not allowed to enter Miancheng?" Warmth looked at the refugees and frowned. Bai Muyang looked around and said, "I'll go ask." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. First Payment of Silver. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 First Payment of Silver 8 Bai Muyang quickly returned and said, "Miancheng does not accept refugees, but allows 15 refugees with guidance to enter the city every day to purchase supplies. The other city gates are not open, so if you want to go to the imperial city, you can only risk climbing over the mountains. Warmth also understands that with so many refugees, Miancheng, a small county town, may not be able to accommodate them, so they dare not enter the city casually. Bai Muyang looked at the nearby mountain with a solemn expression and said, "This mountain is high and steep, and it will take 4 or 5 days at the fastest to flip over. Moreover, entering such deep mountains and forests is also a very dangerous thing, and a bad move could lead to death. This is also the reason why refugees would rather stand outside Miancheng under the scorching sun and wait for government assistance than enter the mountains." Bai Muyang looked at the siblings again and said, "Do you have a guide?" He went to the defending soldiers and asked, "And there are still seats to enter the city today?" "I have it, Goro doesn't." Warmth took his guide out of his bag. The original owner has been following his grandfather around since childhood, and the road signs have always been collected by himself, while Goro's road signs are with his father. Wulang was still young, so it was impossible for him to stay outside the city. Bai Muyang pondered for a moment and said, "Then I'll have to go to the city alone." Warmth plans to personally go to the city and say, "Brother Bai, I want to buy something for women. Would you like to accompany Goro outside the city and wait for me?" The warm words made Bai Muyang's expression stiffen, but he still said, "It's not safe for you to enter the city alone. There are so many refugees outside the city, it's not safe for me and Goro to stay outside the city." Warmth had his own plans and tried to persuade Bai Muyang, "Brother Bai, I won't go in for too long. I will definitely come out before evening. It's only afternoon now, and she has over an hour to do things." Finally, Bai Muyang was convinced by her and called her to a distance. He gave her a 50 liang silver ticket and half a liang of silver coins, saying, "In addition to needing a guide to the city, you also need to pay 15 yuan. You can watch and buy the rest." Most refugees cannot afford to pay these 15 yuan, otherwise they wouldn't have had the opportunity to enter the city at this time. Warmth thought for a moment and only took half a tael of silver. "Consider this money as if I borrowed it from you, and I'll repay it when I come back," he said. Warmth entered the city and found that it was even more desolate than I had imagined. Apart from the shops on both sides of the street, there were many stalls on the street, but the number of people doing business was not proportional to the number of pedestrians on the street. There were obviously more people doing business than pedestrians, and the vendors at those stalls were all drowsy. After asking for directions, Warmth went directly to the best reputed pharmacy in Miancheng called Jurentang. 2 or 3/4 of an hour later, Warmth came out of the Jurentang and walked towards the tailor's shop with 130 taels of silver bills and 20 taels of broken silver in his arms. These silver coins were exchanged for 2 natural bezoars she took out from the traditional Chinese medicine room of the space hospital. Huang, also known as Chou Bao by the pharmacy shopkeeper. Regardless of the era, natural bezoar is very precious and the market demand is also very high. She doesn't have to worry about food and drink, but in this unfamiliar country, she has no silver in her hands, which is why she came up with such a way to get her first silver in this dynasty. She tried to hide the silver ticket in the space, but was surprised and delighted to find it inside. She had tried to put the pheasant and wild rabbit caught by Bai Muyang into the space before, but she couldn't put them in any way. Warmth can be understood now. Her living creatures cannot enter her space, and dead objects like silver bills can be easily placed inside. The tailoring shop in this small county town during the dynasty also sold ready-to-wear clothes and shoes. They didn't need to buy their clothes for the time being. Warmth only bought a few pairs of wear-resistant shoes, and then used 2 yuan to buy a few pieces of leftover cloth from the shopkeeper. "Shopkeeper, do you know where I can sell backpacks?" Warmth asked the tailor shop owner at checkout. "At the end of this street, there is a stall selling bamboo products," said the shopkeeper. Warmth originally only wanted to buy 2 back baskets to pack things, but unexpectedly there were quite a variety of bamboo woven products on the stall. He bought 2 back baskets and 3 sun shading hats in one go, and also bought a bamboo basket with a lid. I bought a backpack, and the warmth turned to the ceramic shop. I bought a pot and a few sets of bowls, chopsticks, and spoons. The outdoor cafeteria in her space also has cookware, but the material of the cookware is the same as nurse shoes, which did not appear in this dynasty, so it was not taken out. After buying what I wanted to buy, warmth covered the cloth head on the back basket, then covered the bamboo hat, and turned into an empty alley. When I came out again, the back basket and bamboo basket became heavy. As soon as warmth walked out of the alley, he was stopped by two boys, one tall and one short, aged 15 or 16, who were carefree. Warmth raised his eyebrows and said, "What are you doing? Just take out all the valuable things on your body if you are sensible." The tall man said in a wicked voice. Warm and indifferent. "I am a refugee, where is anything valuable?" The short boy sneered, "Every refugee who comes to the city to purchase things says that, but everyone is so rich. If you don't have enough money to pay the city entrance fee of 15 won, treat them like fools." Warm squinted his eyes. It seems to be a repeat offender. And it's also specifically targeting the refugees who come to the city to buy. They are all masters who don't shed tears until they see the coffin. The tall man suddenly showed a fierce expression on his face. "We must do it ourselves." The two of them walked towards Warmth at the same time. Warmth had already prepared the anesthesia gun, and with a movement of his feet, he rushed straight towards the short man. Just as he was about to shoot the anesthesia gun, he heard a woman shouting in front of him, "Hurry up, there are robbers here. Hurry up." The two robbers were startled and quickly turned around to look. Warmth was also momentarily stunned, and when he looked up, he saw a child rushing towards him with a group of common people holding either poles or wooden sticks or hoes, surrounding and fighting the two young robbers. "Pain! Pain! Stop beating! Help!" The two teenagers crouched on the ground, hugging their heads and shouting. "Killing you two scoundrels, you still know it hurts." The crowd was extremely angry, and their attack was not light, causing both of them to cry and cry. "Miss, are you okay?" The little woman approached Warmth and asked with concern. "Little sister. Law." Warmth looked at the person in front of her unexpectedly. "Have you also entered the city?" The person in front of her was actually the little woman she had saved on the mountain before. Warmth knows that their mother and son followed the three of them down the mountain, and have been following them from afar these days without disturbing them. Unexpectedly, their mother and son helped her today. The little woman smiled and said, "Cheer and I went to the city to buy food on the way." Cheer first noticed something was wrong and went to persuade the street vendors one by one to help. Warm and shocked, he looked towards the chaotic crowd over there and recognized the vendor of bamboo woven goods, who was holding a pole. "So they're so kind-hearted," he said previously, "the refugees were robbed, and these street vendors all saw their volunteers fighting for it." The little woman smiled for a moment and said, "Miss, let's talk while we walk. It's getting late. If you buy something good, let's leave the city first. We'll close the city gate later." End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Wen Erlang. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Wen Erlang 9. The little woman's son Su Qizhang ran over and said, "Mother, they sent those two people to the yamen." Warmth and solemnly thanked the mother and son. Sometimes fate is so wonderful. When she saved this sister. Law, she never expected that one day she would turn around and help herself. Warmth suddenly believed in the phrase, "Good will be rewarded, evil will be rewarded." It seems that in the future, while ensuring that one's own safety is not endangered, it is better to do more effortless things. "Miss, you're welcome. If it weren't for you that day." The little woman didn't want to recall the unpleasant scene that day. "Miss, not only did she save me, but she also treated Cheer's foot. Even if I lost this life, it wouldn't be enough to repay Mississippi. My sister. Law is too serious." That day, when the child named Cheer fell down the mountain, he twisted his foot and didn't hurt his bones. She just helped him pull his tendons. The three of them walked and chatted, and soon became familiar with each other. The little woman's husband's surname is Su, and he is no longer there. Her son Su Qizhang saw two young men following her at the entrance of the grocery store, and then went to seek help from those street vendors. At first, those vendors certainly didn't want to meddle in this matter, because although those two guys wandered the streets all day, they didn't harm their stalls and only snatched the refugees who came to the city to buy. Su Qizhang told the vendors that the reason why there were fewer and fewer customers in Miancheng and their business was becoming increasingly difficult was because their behavior made many refugees prefer to take a detour rather than enter the city. The vendors of these stalls finally came to their senses and vowed to send those two calamities to the authorities. Warmth looked at Su Qizhang and couldn't help but sigh, "This child is too smart." Su smiled and said, "Don't praise him, Nuanyuan, otherwise his tail will have to go up to the sky." "Sister Su, how old is Cheer?" "9 years old. Have you studied yet?" Warmth asked again. Su's expression darkened as she said, "I used to attend a private school, but later on, there was a severe drought, and everyone was busy escaping from famine." "Are you planning to seek refuge with relatives?" After hesitating for a moment, Su said, "We are planning to go to the imperial city to find our relatives." Warmth was about to say something, but when he thought of Bai Muyang, who was escorting their siblings, he didn't say anything. Bai Muyang and Wulang stood at the city gate, seeing Warmth carrying a backpack and one in his hand. He quickly stepped forward to take it. "There's one more." Warmth took the basket containing pastries from Su Qizhang's hand, and then took out 2 packages of pastries from the basket and stuffed them into Su Qizhang's hand. "I bought quite a lot, these 2 packages are for you to taste." Without waiting for the Su family's mother and son to refuse, Warmth had already run towards Bai Muyang and Wulang. Warmth handed the 2 pairs of men's thick-soled cloth shoes he had bought to Bai Muyang, and whispered a few words to him. Bai Muyang stared at the shoes in his hand for a while before scanning towards the Su family mother and son, and then nodded. "Su's sister. Law, cheer." Warmth ran over to Su's mother and son again. "We are also going to the imperial city. Would you like to come with us?" Su was overjoyed and said, "Is that okay?" Their mother and son have been following them closely these days just to seek shelter and prevent things from happening again on the mountain. If they are willing to take their mother and son with them, of course they would be very grateful. Warmth smiled and nodded. Most of the refugees outside Miancheng have eaten up their dry rations. At first glance, when they saw Warmth and the Su family bringing so many supplies from the city, they stared at them like hungry wolves. Bai Muyang said to Warmth and Su, "We'll cook at the foot of the mountain." Warmth and Su understood, each leading a child behind Bai Muyang and walking towards the mountain ahead. Half an hour later, the group arrived at the foot of the mountain. Looking at the bare mountain wall at the foot of the mountain, Warmth stunned a few people. "What is the situation?" "The trees on the mountain look lush, but there are no weeds at the foot of the mountain." After observing for a moment, Bai Muyang said, "The wild vegetables at the foot of the mountain should have been picked up by the refugees. It seems that this mountain is much more dangerous than imagined, to the point where even the starving refugees dare not venture into it. The wild vegetables have been fully harvested, not even the weeds have been let go." Warmth couldn't believe it. The passage of locusts is nothing more than that. Once again, I am grateful that there is an endless supply of food in the space, and I am not as hungry as others. I am afraid of that taste even when I think about it. Since they had decided to go together, Su took out the grain she had bought and felt a bit embarrassed, saying, "Miancheng grain shop has limited grain purchases, we only bought so much." At the sight of Su's purchase of over 10 pounds of polished rice and 2 strips of pork belly, it was clear that the mother and son were not the ones who lacked money. Due to the drought, prices have skyrocketed, and these refined rice and meat are afraid to cost tens of taels of silver. In the warm basket, there are also dozens of kilograms of rice and flour, as well as preserved meat and duck, all of which are taken from the space. If these foods were to be bought with real gold and silver, at least half of the money earned today would have to be deducted. Bai Muyang didn't ask how Warmth could still buy so much food under the grain purchase restriction. Su sure thought Warmth had other ways or bought sky-high priced rice, and this matter was just fooled away. It's only July now, and the weather is very hot. Su bought raw meat without putting it in. That night, she cooked 2 pieces of meat. Su's cooking skills are very good, coupled with the addition of warm-bought seasoning in cooking a pot of rice. The whole group ate to the brim. The next day at dawn, the group packed up and prepared to go up the mountain. At this moment, a thin and weak boy ran towards them from a distance. Bai Muyang's figure moved and he stopped the young man with a cold face, saying, "What are you doing?" "Nuanyuan, Wulang." The young man looked behind Bai Muyang and almost burst into tears of joy. "It's really you. Second brother." Wulang cried and rushed over after seeing the person coming. "Second brother, how did you come?" "Second brother." Warm and confused. The brain floods with certain memories. Originally, this young man was Wen Chimu, the elder brother of the original owner, and the second among several cousins, also known as the nickname Erlang. Bai Muyang looked at Warmth, saw her nod, and then leaned aside. Erlang led Wulang with red eyes and walked up to Warmth, choking up and saying, "You have suffered." Warmth looked at Wen Erlang, who was starving to the point of only skin and bones, with a waxen complexion, and hesitated to speak. "He seems to be the one who suffers." Erlang misinterpreted his younger sister's expression and said, "Nuanyuan, don't blame Grandpa and Mom and Dad. We didn't expect you to get lost either. After you're gone, Grandma and Mom kept crying and even came to find you in person. But Grandma and Auntie were sick, and Uncle and Auntie also fell ill. Dad definitely couldn't leave, so Grandpa asked me and Big Brother to come to you separately." "Second brother, I'm not blaming my family." Warmth interrupted Erlang's explanation, "Really?" Erlang obviously didn't believe her words and said bitterly, "Nuanyuan, the whole family is really worried about you. New books require tickets and collections." End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Erlang hungry and faint. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Erlang hungry and faint. 10. Warmth nodded and said, "I know. Otherwise, the old man wouldn't have sent his 2.5-year-old children out to find them. She knows how much Mr. Wen values these 2 grandsons. Nuanyuan, second brother didn't lie to you." Erlang felt that his sister didn't think so and was so anxious that she gasped for breath. Warmth couldn't bear to see it and said, "Second brother, take a break first, have some food before we talk. I have something to ask you." Speaking, he took out a pack of pastries and a water bag from one of the baskets and put them in his hand. Erlang's words made Warmth realize that he had been ignoring something very important. She traveled through the wilderness, feeling too anxious and only thinking about how to survive, forgetting the phrase, "There must be a plague after a drought." According to Wen Erlang, almost all of the Wen family have fallen ill. Can't it be that they contracted the plague on the way? Warmth suddenly felt a little anxious. As soon as Erlang took a few sips of water to moisten his throat, Warmth asked him about the symptoms of his family's illness. After listening, Warmth suddenly fell silent. "Nuanyuan, have you learned medical skills from your grandfather? Do you know what diseases Nai, Nyang, and Uncle have?" Erlang asked anxiously. Warmth remained silent for a moment before saying, "If I guess correctly, they should all come out hungry." Before the original owner was separated from his family, the original owner's parents would save their food every day for their 3 children. Similarly, the rest of the family would save their food for their children. In addition, they did not eat salt for a long time, which led to weakness in their hands and feet, and occasional dizziness and vomiting. Erlang was dumbfounded. "My family's illness turned out to be starving. Let's try our best to speed up the journey," Warmth said. What she doesn't lack the most now is food. If this still makes her family starve, then her time traveling won't be a joke. Erlang nodded heavily, eager to catch up with his family. Along the way, there were too many people starving to death, and he was worried about his family. Erlang quickly took a bite of the pastry and wanted to finish it quickly before starting his journey. With this bite, Erlang's eyes widened. This pastry is also so delicious. How could he be willing to finish such a delicious cake? After tasting a piece, I put the rest into my pocket and poured a full stomach of water, barely filling my stomach. This mountain is high and steep, with lush trees and weeds, and no traces of human walking. Bai Muyang, who was leading the way ahead, reminded the group behind him, there are many large beasts, poisonous insects, snakes, and ants in this kind of mountain. Everyone should be careful. Su's heart tightened and she grabbed Chi Er's hand, following closely behind Bai Muyang. And carrying Wulang on his back, Erlang, who was walking at the back, carefully lifted the little guy on his back. For warmth, there is no need to worry about poisonous insects, snakes, and ants. Just before going up the mountain, she sprayed anti-mosquito, snake, and ant medicine on everyone's clothes. Most poisons on the mountain dare not approach, afraid of encountering large beasts. They have no ability to protect themselves except for Bai Muyang. Warm prepared several high-dose anesthesia guns from the space hospital just in case. Suddenly, a bang sound came from behind, followed by the cry of Goro. Second brother. The first few people's faces changed, and when they turned around, they found Erlang lying under a big tree. Fortunately, his body was stopped by the tree, and the two brothers didn't roll down the mountain. Warm steps rushed over to check, then picked up Erlang's pulse. The next second, the warm face turned black. Sister, what's wrong with second brother? Wulang cried and asked. I'm starving. Taking a deep breath of the anger and worry in my heart under the pressure, I took a bottle of glucose water from the space and put it into a water bag, then gave Erlang a few bites. The others were stunned when they heard the warm words. When we stopped for lunch just now, each of us had 2 mantou and an egg. How could we still faint from hunger? Have you ever fallen or injured? Warmth gave Erlang water before looking at Wulang. Wulang shook his head, and before Urge fainted, he put him down and said, Urge's head seems to have hit the trunk of a tree. Will Urge be foolish? Just bumped into a bag, don't worry. Warmth took out a silver needle from his bundle and stabbed it in the middle of Erlang's body. Erlang quickly opened his eyes. When Erlang touched the back of his head and sat up, grinning and asking, what's wrong with me? Wulang said quickly, second brother, sister said you're starving and dizzy. Erlang's expression stiffened, and he secretly glanced at his own sister. Seeing her calm face, his heart couldn't help but lift and he hesitated, I drank water, I'm not hungry. Under the warm and cold gaze, Erlang's voice became quieter and quieter. Your foundation is already poor, and now we are crossing mountains and rivers, and you still have to carry Wulang on your back. How can you have the strength if you don't eat enough? Erlang didn't know, and Warmth knew he must have secretly hidden his food to bring to his family, so his tone was a bit heavy. You're dragging everyone's feet now. Erlang's face turned pale and he lowered his head in self-blame, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Su also guessed why Erlang was starving and quickly smiled to make amends, saying, Brother Erlang, Nuanyuan is also worried about your health. We don't need food now, you really don't need to save. When we arrive in the next city, we can buy more food to bring to your family. Wulang nodded vigorously and said, Sister, you were so anxious when you fainted just now. You were the first one to run over. Erlang felt that Su Shi and Wulang were comforting him, and that his sister wouldn't blame them, so how could she possibly worry about him? However, my younger sister is not wrong either. He is indeed dragging everyone back. So when Warmth handed him the pastries again, he didn't hide anymore and ate the whole package of pastries in one breath, drinking water. But why is this water so sweet? It seems like sugar was added. Erlang ate and drank half a bag of glucose water, and quickly regained his strength. However, Bai Muyang dared not let him carry Wulang anymore and personally led the way with Wulang on his back. This mountain is too high, and the group just walked halfway up the mountain that night. In this mountain, there are many uncertain factors even during the day, let alone at night. When Bai Muyang found a small cave in the evening, although it could only accommodate 3 or 4 people to squeeze in, at least there was a place for wind protection. There is nothing else on this mountain, and there is no shortage of firewood. Bai Muyang treated all the weeds in front of the cave, created a small piece of open space, and made a fire, which can prevent wild animals from attacking and also prevent the cold, because the temperature in the mountains is very low at night. In the middle of the night, waves of wolf howls scared everyone awake. Erlang ran out of the small cave and said, "Brother Bai, is it a wolf barking?" Su's face showed panic and she hugged Cheer tightly. Cheer's small face was tense, but she did not show her fear. Wulang's face was extremely white. "It's a wolf barking, it's quite far away." "You guys keep sleeping," said Bai Muyang with a light breeze. Along the way, Warmth has gained some understanding of Bai Muyang, and he firmly believes in his words. Her tense nerves relaxed and she and the Su family went back to the cave. However, except for Goro, the others dared not sleep anymore, including Cheer. End of this chapter.